Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Get an A in TOK. We are looking at November 22, Title 1, Prompt 1, whatever you want to call it. We're going to look at how to approach this prompt. I'm going to break it down. Then I'm going to give you some really good examples. So let's get an A in TOK.
Get an A in TOK.
Okay, now first, if you haven't already, check the link down below. I'm going to put some free resources up here that will help you out. And if you're trying to figure out how to write the TOK essay, if you're trying to figure out how to put information in certain orders, I've got two different ways that you can organize the essay. It's just plug and play. You put your ideas in there, you put your evidence in there, and I'm going to help you out for free. If you want even more help, what you can do is join the over 100 people now from all around the world who have asked me to help them with their TOK essays and exhibitions. You should probably be seeing a map somewhere up on the screen here, but I'm helping people from all over. My prices start at just $25 for an assignment. So check me out there, fiverr.com/PatFreakinJones. That's me. And I can help you out with any IB assignment. I would probably not ask that you send me chemistry stuff, but I'll help you out if you've got an essay. I'll help you out with your TOK work, Lang Lit, I'll help you out with any of that. Exams, I'll help you out with that. All right, let's figure out prompt number 1. Let's look at my screen. Title 1 says this. Let me drink some Diet Coke first. Hope you like my Buc-ee's hat. Within an area of knowledge, is it more important to have credibility or power? Discussed with reference to the natural sciences and one other area of knowledge. Okay, so my first thought is this, and this is super important, and we're going to go back and forth on this, but this prompt, I think you can be very strategic and do something that I often say may not be necessary, and it's this. It's important to define terms when necessary, and I would argue with it that with this prompt, it is necessary. Here, I would define for yourself, so in your own words, what does important mean? And then make your decision on the prompt. And I'll talk about that in a minute on how you define important. So I'll read these essays all the time. In the introductions, they just had defined every single word in the introduction. That's awful. It's boring. I have a video of ways to open up the TOK essay. That's super cool. Go ahead and do that. But yeah, you don't need to define credibility. We know what credibility is. You're going to explore it later on, but you don't need to define power. We know what power is, but when you're talking about those two different things, go ahead and say, for the sake of this essay, for the terms of, I knocked over my microphone. For the terms of this paper, important is going to be this. Maybe it's usefulness. Maybe it's longer lasting. Maybe it's monetary. I don't know. But go ahead and say you are going to decide which is more important based on how you interpret the word important. So yeah, because credibility, it accomplishes this. Is that important? Or power accomplishes this. Is that more important? Think about how you're going to decide what it means for something to be important. Okay, the second thing that's actually the reason I'm doing this is I read an essay just the other day by a person who did not follow this advice. And I'm like, I'll bet a lot of people are going to make this mistake. So that's why I'm doing Title 1 up first. And it's this. You must come to a conclusion. Tell me which is more important. Don't be a fence sitter. Hint about your answer in the introduction, then fully flesh out your answer in the conclusion. So don't say credibility is sometimes more important and power sometimes more important. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's what you believe, but that's not going to get you a high score. So say, based on how I interpret the word important, credibility is more important, or power is more important. So in your conclusion, say, this is the truth. Here's why I believe it based on everything that I've learned. So answer credibility or power. Don't say sometimes credibility and sometimes power. That is not the best way to score well. Okay, the next thing is that a strong TOK concept and something that the new course guide loves to talk about is the idea of authority. So explore what authority looks like and how it relates to power in both AOKs. So you're going to look at, first of all, obviously, the natural sciences. So what do authorities look like in the natural sciences? What gives an authority credibility? That's pretty easy to understand. But what gives a natural science authority power? How do they use that power? What happens because they have that power? Those are different things that is very important to talk about. And so even though authority is not mentioned here, I think it's pretty clear that talking about authority will help you out. Okay, the next thing is when you're talking about credibility, think about things that are published in the natural sciences and why. So one of the big things that you really have to talk about, and we'll see some more examples of this, is the idea of peer review. Peer review equals credibility in both the natural and the human sciences. So what establishes credibility through peer review. Why is that credible? Why is something that's not peer reviewed, and we're going to talk about this, why is that considered not credible? So how does credibility work? I wouldn't go super in depth on this because you only have 1,600 words, but this is something interesting to think about. Now, an optional curveball, if you're an American friend of mine, is is it possible to have both credibility and power? And then how is this achieved? This would be a cool thing to put maybe as your last body paragraph. That would be a fun thing to think about that might provide some good counterclaims to things you've already said. So I probably should have put this first, but this is huge, and this is based on the feedback that I gave another student, was you need to make sure that this is not a paper about credibility and power, okay? Now listen to me here. Instead, it is an exploration, and I would say and discussion of which one is more important. This is in many ways persuasive. You are going to show both perspectives in each AOK and then tell me which one of those is more important. So if all you do is say, here's what credibility looks like in the natural sciences, here's what power looks like in the natural sciences, and that's all you do, you'll get a C or a D. You'll be passing TOK. But if you don't talk about which one is more important, which I think a lot of people will forget to do, you will not score an A. I promise. And that's not a threat, but that's just to say, discuss power. Discuss credibility, but then be constantly providing this interaction to say, here's why the power is not important, or here's why the power is more important. So every paragraph should end with something talking about this. All right, but you're not on this because you want generalities. You want some evidence, right? All right, let's do this. Let's look at evidence. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give you some brief overviews of things that I would use. I'm not going to tell you the perspective because that's cheating. Also, like when you send me your stuff on Fiverr, don't ask me to write your essays. I'm not going to do that. I'm still like a teacher, okay? So let me give you some ideas, some directions to go that will really help you out. Okay, so the first one is, oh, and by the way, all of these I'm going to put links down to in the description, just the things that I use for researching. I'm going to put these on my website as well, getanAntok.com, partially because that will prevent you from just ripping off and plagiarizing from me. But the first thing to look at, and this is super obvious and almost too overused at this point, is the idea of the MMR vaccine causing autism. But when you think about this, why did so many people believe that? This obviously, these claims being made had power. So why do people still believe it? I'm going to post some examples here, and you can actually look at the original papers and stuff, but you want to discuss why was this claim so powerful that even though credible people have completely shot it down, even though people don't believe it anymore, there are still some that do. That's a powerful claim. Why is that power existing? I just don't get it. Another thing when we're talking about the natural sciences is, and this is kind of related, is the US infectious disease expert, Dr. Fauci. He wasn't believed by millions of people because he was a scientist. So why are people not believing authorities on the basis of them being authorities? And then on the flip side, when we talk about COVID-19 conspiracy theorists, why do people believe non-scientists and memes, things that normally don't have any credibility, but we tended to say these experts, they're mainstream, they don't really know the truth, or they're not telling us the truth? Why did that happen? So there's a couple of different things where we have people who are credible not being believed, and then we have people who are not credible being believed and making claims that carry a lot of power. Now getting into the AOK of history, and remember, you don't have to do anything except for the natural sciences. So now I'm going to give you some optional things to talk about. I posted this in my first video when I outlined some of the prompts, but I'm going to put the link here from the Times of Israel. But there was a part of the Jewish Bible found really recently, and they said that it predates anything else by over 500 years, and even the word of God is used, and it would be YHWH because the Israelites did not actually use the word Yahweh or God. And so the interesting thing, though, is not that, although it's cool, and we can believe that, but one of the things that they did was they broke, they didn't behave like most scientists behave. When they made this discovery, the first thing they did was hold a press conference. They did not get their discoveries checked. They did not get peer reviews. They did not publish it in an academic journal. Instead, what they did was they got it published in a bunch of popular sources, in a bunch of newspapers. So why is that? Does that mean that we shouldn't believe them? Why is peer review required all of the time. So that's a credibility thing that might counter the requirement for peer review. Now, another thing, I'm not just going to pick on Japanese people because Americans, we are so guilty of this too, but this is so commonly done. And I found two really good sources and also Wikipedia. But if you look at a lot of the Japanese textbooks that talk about how Japan behaved in World War II, they don't tell a lot. And so there is a whole Wikipedia site. I'm looking at Japanese history textbook controversies. So you can talk about that. But basically, when a governing power decides we're not going to talk about history. Now, this could also be human sciences if you want to talk about politics, political science, and things like that. But in America, and this is in my TOK exhibition ideas, in America, in Texas right now, where I am currently, they are saying we want to take liberal policies in history out of our textbooks because we don't want people believing in a strong federal government. Super weird, but that's two examples of history. Looking at the human sciences, one of my favorite things of all time is called Mini Labs 2. I'll post a link down here in the description. But peer review, we believe, creates credibility. But what do we do if peer review says things are not replicatable? So in the human sciences and in the natural sciences, we talk a lot about things being replicated. So if I do an experiment and I get a result of A, and I do the experiment again, I should think that result A will come up again. But Mini Labs 2 showed that a lot of scientific, psychological experiments couldn't be replicated, not even once. And so only about 50% of the studies that were replicated turned out to have the same results as the original studies. So does that mean that there's any credibility in psychology? What you can also do is think about any psychology or human science study. And there's this interesting quote that I got from one of the TOK textbooks, and it's this: "You get publicity and tenure for fascinating truths about the human condition, not about the U.S. undergraduate. The temptation is to generalize and universalize." So what this means is a lot of studies in the human sciences are done for the sake of becoming famous, becoming big, helping a professor get tenure, which is basically they can't get fired. So if we're constantly trying to make studies that get more power to the scientists, how does that relate with credibility? And then what you can also talk about with anything that you've learned in TOK class, in the human sciences section, or in your psych class, if you're one of the lucky people who take psych, is ask yourself, why was this study done? How does power connect to the findings that the researchers were searching for? And then why are we always searching for groundbreaking studies? Why are we not replicating studies over and over again? And then finally, something that I think is really interesting, if you want to talk about the human science of economics, is we often say that quantitative data is more credible than qualitative. You can use this in almost anywhere. But why is quantitative data so much more credible than qualitative? Why do we look down on individual stories and we look up at things that are demonstrated through math? That's a really interesting idea of power and credibility in the human sciences. Okay, the last thing that we'll look at is the arts. I almost didn't do this, but then I got two ideas here. So the first is with Rotten Tomatoes. So if you look at Rotten Tomatoes, it's a movie review aggregate site, and it looks at the good reviews by professional reviewers. So these people have credibility and they have power. But you can just pick your favorite movie, go ahead and look at Rotten Tomatoes. There are many times when the critics say this movie is great and people hate it. Or when people say this movie is great and the critics just despise it. So and you can also look at works of art, look at movies that have been review bombed. I think you could even look at video games, because video games are art. Yes. And you can think about how reviews work between that balance of credibility and power. What does power even look like when we're saying this work of art is good or bad? One thing going on right now is the game Diablo Immortal. That work of art is being judged based on how it makes money. So if you look at some of the professional reviews, they're saying it's good. If you look at some of the gamers, they're saying it's the worst game of all time. Well, how does credibility and power approach that game? And then which is more important? And then finally, and I've talked about this one before too, you can think about award shows, think about the Oscars, you can think about the Grammys. Do they have power? Do they have credibility? The Golden Globes is like a voting body of like 86 people. And they most famously have no black people in their voting body. So is there any credibility in that? Was there credibility in that? And then what you can also look at is what is the result of winning an award? Do we remember that work of art? Do we remember that song? What truly makes a successful piece of art? Is it approval by people with power? Or is it approval by people with credibility? And what does that even look like? I don't know. That's your job. So with all of that being said, I hope I gave you some good examples. If you want some help, you can reach out to me at fiverr.com/PatFreakinJones. I'll help you out. My prices start really low, and I'm just going to let you guys go. Get to work, start early, don't slack off. And I hope TOK sucks a little bit less than it did at the beginning of this video. I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.